Hi guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike, one of the two rap dorks.
Yes, we are rap dorks, rap nerds. We've been called rap nerds, I think, now 4 times.
I'm so proud of it. So proud.
Twice by one person, and then twice in the same text by another famous. David's famous. He's a publisher. He's famous by a famous person.
Dude, I embrace that title. I am all about it because I had a blast. I'm going to say this was my best lunch break in over a decade of being a teacher. This is my best lunch break I've ever had.
Yeah, so if you don't know what we're talking about, you can go check out our emergency. You want to call it an emergency pod. The first time we had to do an emergency pod on the spot feed, where I figured out the clues, and Mike had called the title. We got the title reveal, Oath of Loyalty. And I had to talk to someone. Only one who I could talk to is Mike, obviously. So I called him at work. I texted him. We have to talk. Luckily, you were on lunch. We recorded a mini session. We didn't have any of our equipment, so it's low grade audio. But still, we had to get on this. And freaking David Brown tweeted it out, like 2 rap nerds geeking out on this title and the plot summary reveal.
Dude, and I hadn't seen it. You got to it 30 minutes after it was first posted by James and the VinceFlynn.com crew. I hadn't seen anything about it. All I saw was your text saying, you were right. And I lost my mind because I was so happy with that title. And then you guys got to see, well, our patrons could see, we released the first reaction video, but you guys can all hear the audio on our most recent episode. I hadn't read that plot description yet because with the title reveal was a short 2-3 paragraphs of a plot description. I lost it, Chris. I'm still going to say it. It's almost everything I could hope this next part of the Enemy at the Gate storyline goes to, but in a way that I would have never conceived. So it was what I wanted in essence, but of course Kyle got so many of the details seemingly right. I can't remember being more pumped for a rap book.
Yeah, and so the episode you're about to hear, where we go into Kyle's villains, we recorded this not last week, but 2 weeks ago, and you go into some of those things that Kyle, is going to dive into in this next book. So you're going to hear us, speculating what we want to see from the Cooks in the future, and it everything we could want and more. I'm so stoked for this book. I was really stoked for Enemy of the Gates. Obviously I'm always ready for a new rap book, but just reading this one, for some reason, I just have this jolt of energy, really wanting this. I need September. September can't come fast enough.
Right. Yeah, and I said it in one of our recordings, I was jazzed for Total Power because it was a cool concept.
Right.
But I didn't see how it related to where the character arcs were going. I was jazzed for Enemy at the Gates, but I was like, okay, doesn't really relate to the Total Power stuff. Is it going to continue that? This one is holy cow. It's absolutely going to deliver on the part 2 of Enemy at the Gates part 1. And that's something I think was the hallmark of Vince when he would have a multi-book arc. It defines the series that the storylines connect and bleed and the characters' journeys continue. We're going to get it. It's happening.
And we don't have to wait long. We're going to get the cover reveal soon. We love a cover on the Mitrap Pod. So we got the newsletter yesterday. It says cover reveal coming soon. And then there's a little tear in this box. Is that, the actual cover? You think that, or are you just playing with it? I don't know. Obviously this is an audio medium, so you might not know what I'm talking about, but it's like a couple of lines, blue lines, and then one red line. It kind of, I'm thinking it's some sort of flag, but it might not be. I don't know. I'm super intrigued by this. Can't wait for the cover.
Yeah.
Can't wait to talk. Hope we can talk to Kyle before the book comes out to see where's his mind's at. Once he turns it in, maybe. Yeah, really, really, really stoked for this book.
I don't know. This little teaser of the cover. Is this what they're going to use? Yeah, these blue and red stripes with scarring, tear marks over them on a black background. Is it the flag? Are these the letters of a word? Is it spelling out loyalty? I don't know. And they're really big. The stripes are super big. It looks like they would fill the entire cover.
The entire novel, the novel book.
Or is it a subversion? Is this a little teaser that actually has nothing to do with the cover? So James tweeted on the vinceflynn.com social media official accounts, we're getting the cover this week.
Oh, can't wait. Can't wait.
We're going to have to touch base again, get our first reactions on tape. So if you see it first, I see it first, I know what our first texts are going to be.
I'll make sure I bring my my microphone in my backpack this week so we can have some better audio.
I'm going to pack my microphone. I'm going to be carrying my microphone and my laptop anywhere I go. Like I'm going to the bathroom or going to Whole Foods to get some lunch. I'm just going to bring it with me to be ready on the spot.
Instant reaction podcast ready. But that's not the only thing we had this week. We had a great hangout with some of our patrons, including a new patron that we got. It was really nice to, engage with the community. Unfortunately, we didn't have, I think we just had one clue. We might have had the second clue, I forget. But we were talking about it and, spitballing some of our ideas with them. And we got something special from that. Do you want to share with the community what we got from that?
This was a very special moment in the history of Mitch Rat Pod. This moment vindicated so much of the hard work we put in and the creativity that comes out of this podcast. To see that and the torch being carried by our listeners, our patrons. When Daryl said his thoughts on the first hangout can best be summed up in the form of a limerick. I was just so proud.
I don't like what this president said. I don't like people egging you on, adding fuel to the fire of your literary works. I don't know how to feel about that, but it was great to get it either way.
Are you saying you want to start the hashtag Stop the Limerick movement?
Stop the limerick. No, I won't go that far. Oh, man.
Well, here's what Daryl wrote
keep
for
the limericks coming. Keep the limericks coming.
All right. We will. Daryl, this was awesome. I love it. I'm going to read it out. This was your limerick you shared with us. Today marks the beginning of my first patron hangout. I give to the main rap nerds, Chris and Mike, a huge shout out. Mitch, Scott, Irene are our faves. Action scenes we do crave, but it is Vince and Kyle's art that we tout. Now, limericks aren't really my thing, but it is to this party what I bring. Chris and Mike lead the show to tell us all about Mitch that they know, so we too can make it to spring.
Boom, baby.
Daryl, man, for that, we are hooking you up with the January patron giveaway. You earned this one, a copy of The Survivor, signed by Kyle Mills, coming at you. Thank you. Thanks for being a patron. Thanks for that limerick.
Yes, thank you for that. And if you too would like to be a part of our next patron hangout, to all of our patrons, let us know if you want to come hang out. But if you want to join this community, just go to our website, mitchratpod.com, and you can hit is it an orange button? Or do we get rid of the orange button?
Support us on Patreon.
You're always tweaking it. Yeah, just support us on Patreon.
Although a website is also being revamped for our Season 2 launch, which we told the patrons about. We'll keep it under wraps for the general crew. But I would say in the next month or two, you'll certainly be hearing about what's next for Mitch Rat Pod.
Can't wait. Can't wait to share that to you guys. That'll be fun.
Before we get there, though, what, Chris, are we bringing to the people today?
Right. So I mentioned it briefly, but we today have the honor to cover Kyle's villains. We did a similar episode after we wrapped up all of Vince's novels, broke down all of his villains. So I thought it was only right to do it with Kyle's villains. And we sort of talked about all the ones that showed up in his books, from The Survivor to Enemy at the Gates. And then we each gave our ranking. So yeah, we hope you enjoy this pod, and maybe you can hit us on Insta, social, Facebook, and let us know your top villains. Either Kyle's, Vince's, or all of them. Well, since, Mike, we finished all the books, and we finished all of Kyle's books, and we did this when we finished Vince's, and I think it's only appropriate we do it for Kyle. We got to talk about villains. And so today we're going to break down from Kyle's how many books? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's done 6, right? Yeah. 6 books, 6 villains.
7 books with 8 on the way.
With 8 on the way. Sorry. I miscounted here. Yeah, and so we have, we're breaking it down between, we always talk about this big bad, big red, and the secondary villains. So I think it's going to be a fun conversation. And obviously at the end, we're going to give you each of our top 5s we have. So,
yeah, I'm very interested in looking for trends like that. How did Vince create a big bad, and who were his secondary villains? Does a Kyle book have as many or the same quantity and quality of these big bads and secondary villains? What role does politics play and domestic enemies? And I think we're going to see some different trends between Vince's style and Kyle's craft.
Definitely.
But before we get there, you know what I like to do to kick off some of our podcasts?
What would that be, Mike?
I like to share with you my thoughts in the form of a limerick. An evil cast of characters, one might say, of whom Kyle crafted in the right way. Rickman and Nasser, Crouppen and yes, Nash, sir. When they die, 'tis a bright day.
That was a good one.
Maybe not Mike Nash. I don't know if it was a good day when he died, but...
No, that wasn't a good day when he died, but...
No.
Turning him into the villain, that was pretty contentious. Will he crack our top 5? Would he crack our top 5?
I don't think he's a main villain, though. He's almost a sympathetic, unfortunate, vulnerable villain. So yeah, I'm not going to say big bad, but I mean we'll get there. We'll go through all. What do you think? Should we go through all the books and just recap, do a summary of who were the villains and who was the big bad in each book, real quick?
Yeah. I think let's do that. All right. So in the Survivor, we have a kind of controversial idea of big bad in Joe Rickman, even though he's dead. His looming presence obviously is the big driver in this entire book. And I think we would have the secondary villains be Ahmed Taj, obviously, who has this big heel turn. We don't really see him being... He's obviously in The Last Man, but becomes more of a player in The Survivor. We have Akhtar Durrani. And then we have, obviously, Louis Gould is back.
Right.
And Senator Carl Ferris. So we can see, you could see here this is, again, we said it at the time that this is probably Kyle's closest book to being like Vince.
Yeah.
So you could see how there's these big players, both obviously the one in the CIA, one in a foreign intelligence, a politician. You have another assassin. So we got some interesting players there.
Definitely the closest to Vince's style. And one reason I'm going to say that is because of Carl Ferris.
Yeah.
He's not the biggest villain. He's in the background for most of the book because Ahmed Taj is pulling the strings. It's very heavily centered on Pakistan and Pakistani politics. Ahmed Taj becomes a really key player. But what Carl Ferris is doing in the background to kind of hamper the U.S.'s efforts, get in the way of Mitch and Irene, I don't know if Kyle does that again. And of course, Carl Ferris was created by Vince. I think he was in The Last Man, right? So Kyle kind of had to keep that storyline going. And the fork at the dinner party, like Rapp taking out a politician in that way, he doesn't even help that woman. There's a woman at the dinner party caught up in the stampede. Ferris ignores her. It's like, Rapp, you got to help me. Rapp stabs him. Like, oh my God, I loved Rapp battling a domestic enemy, let's call him what he is. I don't know if Kyle really keeps that theme going of the politician who's just a scumbag.
He doesn't keep that going, but I think it does pop up every now and then. And I don't know if you want to jump around and go in order, but definitely in Lethal Agent, I would argue that Christine Barnett character, we begin to see that again. Obviously, the big bad in Lethal Agent is Syed Halabi, who was created by Vince, right? No, it was created by Kyle because he's from
No, yeah, it was Kyle's from Enemy of the State. Yeah.
Yes.
So I would agree. I think Christine Barnett is the only other politician that I would say rises to the level of Vince approved, the seal of approval from Vince, or what he gave us with American politicians. The Cooks, maybe, we'll see.
Yeah, you wouldn't say the Cook. I was going to argue the Cooks.
Yeah, it's a new world with them, so I think it's just a little different. I don't know. Carl Ferris definitely had the Vince feel of a Hank Clark, Senator Rudin, some of these bozos. Christine Barnett definitely, I think, was headed that way. We just didn't see her again. And do you remember what we said on Vince's villains? I think to really rise to the level of a Hank Clark, of these major players, you had to be in 2 or 3 books. You had to have a bit of an arc. The one-offs are really good and well created, but I don't know if they rise to like legendary status of top villains.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems with Barnett is that she was only in Lethal Agent, right? But we've said this multiple times. We think there was way more meat on the bone with her that you could have had. But unfortunately, she was killed off. So in Order to Kill, we have the emergence of Maxim Krupin, but he's kind of like a secondary villain in that book. He sort of plays towards the back. I would say he's more of the big bad in Red War for most of the book until the very end, when you can make an argument that Sokolov and him sort of share time. I think the main villain in the story actually is a villain in his own right for most of this book, but ultimately becomes one of Rapp's, I don't know, I want to call him a colleague. I guess he is a colleague. Would you call Grisha a friend?
In the end, yeah, I would. I would say colleague is the best word. Ally, maybe. But I think at times in Red War, I think it rises to friendship.
Yeah. So Grisha is the big bad in Order to Kill. You have some other players like the General Shirani, who is like leading ISIS, and then ISIS also just different players, play a minor role in the background. And I feel like that was very similar to Vince. He would have like some of these players from different countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, whatever.
You know who I think of there? General Zahir in The Last Man. That Afghani army general, but who was also former Taliban.
Right.
Who was raking in the money from the U.S. I think Kyle brings up a couple of random ISIS leadership type guys who don't play a big role, but they create that type or that persona of someone running these organizations. They're not the main villain driving the plot, but they're in the universe, doing some bad things.
Right.
Enemy of the State, I really like what Kyle does here. Because like you said, Maxim Krupin will definitely come back. But we take a break from him and the Russia storyline to go to the Saudis. The prince, I think it's Faisal's nephew?
Yeah, his nephew.
Prince Talal bin Musaid. Yeah, King Faisal's nephew.
His sister's son, I think.
The prince is getting involved with ISIS and funding a lot of terrorism. But the main driver of the game is Ali Nasser, his intelligence chief. And I love how Kyle brings in another of Irene's colleagues, someone on the level of Irene.
Yeah, on the level. Not equal in terms of like brilliance, but just equal in position. In position, yeah.
Yeah, in their country. So Ali Nasser, an intelligence chief, giving me vibes of those Ben Friedman days back with Vince. And so Ali Nasser is a scary, calculating character because he's got the goods. He's got the resources of the Saudi royal family and the resources of the Saudi intelligence apparatus, who on paper is our ally. And so there's some level of, collaboration there. But the fact of how deep he can go in his schemes, he even brings back Joel Wilson.
Right.
A disgraced FBI agent who he knows has a personal beef with Rapp for burying him in the North Dakota, division. Ali Nasser, gets in bed with him. But once you are scared out of your wits by Ali Nasser, Kyle drops some breadcrumbs that he's not even the big bad.
Right,
he
exactly.
is in the terms of the story, but he's a pawn in the bigger network of Saeed Halabi's ISIS. And I love having Halabi in the background of that book, knowing a storm's brewing when the terrorists can even control and freak out Ali Nasser, the head of a major country's intelligence services.
Yeah, the work that Kyle does to build up Halabi in Enemy of the State makes it so much better when you go read Lethal Agent. So I read like Enemy of the State a long time ago, and then we did Lethal Agent as one of like our first books, right? Because we wanted to sort of gear up for Total Power. So it hit so much harder when we went back and did that Enemy of the State pod, and I remembered everything from Lethal Agent, and it was just like, wow. You then understand the progression, and he's set up perfectly to be the big bad in Lethal Agent.
Yeah.
I think bringing in Joel Wilson, it brings back vibes of those, like a Stu Garrett. And yeah, he's not a politician, but he's in the establishment, the government, this bumbling idiot who's trying to, there's been a couple of people, lower rung people at the CIA who's trying to, mess with rap. I think at one point there was an inspector general. I should have brought up Vince's villains notes so I could compare. I'll probably bring it up in a second. But yeah, you just sort of, we've seen this before, and I it's another layer of sort of buffoonery to try to screw with rap.
Yeah. So, what do you think if the release of the books were flipped? If the Order to Kill storyline, where Grisha is going after Scott and Rap, hurts them, the end fight scene, Grisha versus Rap, who's better, and Maxime Krupin is pulling the strings, led into Red War, where Krupin is dying, somehow he lost Grisha. I don't think the connection there would make sense, but at least the Russian storyline would have continued. And then it would have gone into, once you wrap that up, you have Krupin out of the way, you have Grisha essentially retiring, then you go into the Saudi line of Enemy at the State, the Saudi intelligence chief funding terrorism, ISIS resurgence, which would lead into the peak of Saeed Halabi's ISIS network in Lethal Agent.
Honestly, that would work perfectly. I think
and
you
it
could.
Goes to Total Power, because ISIS was in bed with Power Station.
Exactly. Honestly, that's a better way to order these books.
I guess that's hindsight 2020.
Yeah, he obviously had these stories, both that he wanted to tell, and one was working, the other one, just creative juices flowing. But honestly, you could even do your own, we argue that you should start with Transfer of Power, not American Assassin. But you could even sort of update your own personal chronological order reading or order you want to read these books, and you could flip Enemy of the State and Red War, and I don't think you would miss anything. And honestly, it would flow better because you would get the Russia story. The only thing is like the whole
Grisha.
The little bit of the, but if you did a little, you could honestly rework the story and have the end. Yeah. You'd have to work the story at the end of Red War. He still owes Mitch one, so that's why he has to go and then do this Enemy of the State thing, type thing.
You'd have to in Red War, though, and this would be pretty thin. The only complication, you'd have to have a reason for Grisha to do a 180 and all of a sudden help Rap.
Right, exactly.
Kill Krupin.
At that point, he wants to get out,
Right. You could just imagine Grisha fighting Rap at the end of Order to Kill in the Saudi desert, and the nuke goes off. And then next book, it's like, hey, you want to help me kill your president? Sure, let's do it. Let's go bird watching in the Russian countryside.
That doesn't work at all. So
some retooling, but at least you would have kept the Russia arc, the Krupin arc, and then you would have moved into, almost it would feel like a 3-book ISIS arc. Saeed Halabi's ISIS in Enemy at the State, running the Saudis, in Lethal Agent, getting the virus, and then in Total Power, what's left of his network, working with an internal enemy Power Station.
Yeah, we forgot to mention Sokolov and Pushkin, who are another, Pushkin kind of like a Victor, a Chet Bramble type character. Just another operator in the system for a foil for Rap. And then Sokolov, who, we had our quips about what we didn't get from him and what I feel like we both wanted more, because I felt like he was playing up to be this, to eventually usurp Krupin to be the big bad. Yeah. But in the end, he sort of got ahead of himself.
Dude, can you imagine? Do you remember at the end of the Red War pod when we wanted Sokolov to stay around and kind of be the one to influence Russian politics as the next big bad? Can you imagine Sokolov screwing with the American election with Christine Barnett? And then when Rap kills her, Sokolov is like, damn it, we got to screw up America's democracy even more. And Sokolov secretly is kind of working the cooks into power.
Right.
Or he's feeding Power Station a lot of the intel. Someone like a Sokolov who's really, really deep. Remember, he was in his mansion, like wargaming where the Russian troop movements are. He was like a philosopher king reading all these scientific articles. I feel like that's somebody who could really pull strings in the background and be smart enough to get away with it.
Right. I agree. Two other people we get in Lethal Agent are this Carlos Esparza, who is the down in Mexico. He's the head of the cartel that Mitch has to
Kingpin.
He has to go undercover with. He reminds me of, Gideon Alma reminds me of him from Enemy of the States, and I feel like we've seen. Well, what's the? I blocked this book. Executive Power. We saw in like the Philippines. There was a guy who was in charge. I guess he was in charge of the Filipino army, but he was giving me about sort of that kind of vibes. What I have it pulled up here.
There's also someone in the Filipino army helping us, supporting Mitch getting into the camp too. I think we had both sides in that one.
Yeah, true. I can't find it. And then Kevin Gray, who's the chief of staff of Christine Barnett. And in the end, he's like playing along the whole time, but then at the end he sort of turns on her and, works against her. So he like tries to be like Stu Garrett, but in the end he does a complete 180.
He was
I don't know if he's quite a villain.
Stu Garrett.
Yeah, faux Stu Garrett. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he was almost a villain by circumstance. That his job was cutthroat politics of Washington, and he was damn good at it, and good at the social media, 21st century communications PR piece. But he saw when Christine Barnett was going so deep into it, risking breaking laws, ruining people's reputations, spinning a narrative that ultimately is good for her, but not good for America. Gray was questioning that. So, yeah, he was like a Stu Garrett light who had some moral compass in him.
Exactly. Had a moral compass.
Right. He wanted to play hardball in Washington, but he wanted to do it in a way that respects the institutions, of government. So, yeah, he was a pretty interesting character for playing such a minor role in just one book.
In Total Power, we get Power Station, obviously, John Alton. Really interesting character. I mean, you were sort of down on him in terms of like, you felt like he didn't work, but I like the one thing I do like about him is just it's something different. It was something different we hadn't really seen before. I don't know. He's not a politician. He's not involved with some sort of terror group. Completely out for himself. I don't know. I guess he's like Hank Clark if Hank Clark never was a senator, I guess, if you want to, like, not in terms of stature, but like wanting to be what Hank Clark wanted. He wanted the same things Hank Clark wanted.
Yeah, I like the idea of trying something new.
I guess can you tell me why, what you were down on him for? Not to rehash our Total Power pod, but.
Right, it's been a while ago. I think, so my favorite part about him was the psychology inside his brain in the committee hearing.
Sure.
When he's very combative with the senators and these watchdogs who are acting like they know what they're talking about. So I will say, perhaps the closest Kyle has come to a Vince Flynn committee hearing room was in Total Power with Power Station. So I loved that scene. I just think once we got from John Alton is a super nerd, very conceited, megalomaniac, kind of got mental issues going on, and we went to now he's an operator running this ISIS plot and commanding these ISIS dudes actually out in the field and trying to escape, and the heartbeat monitor. I thought he actually took on too much, where I think a Vince book, and this is a theme I wanted to bring up to you at the end, would have brought in a cast of characters that are believable. It would have been almost like a cabal of bad guys, each playing their own roles. Power Station just had a couple of ISIS dudes with him, whose only job literally was fire the gun and hit the substation. So I thought he ended up being, for what I thought would be very different, very edgy, different kind of character, he became one-dimensional. And he had to do everything. So he flatlined, and then even though he flatlined, he still had to do everything. He had to plan the escape route, and he had to tell them which substations to hit. I saw him as the nerdy guy who can concoct the plan. If someone like, you know how the prince, Talal bin Musaid, had Ali Nasser, and Ali Nasser did the dirty work? If John Alton had somebody, an intern even, some NSA person who went with him, defected with him, and wanted to do the craziness with him, I feel like he just needed a sidekick, and it just ended up being flat that he was just doing everything on his own. So I liked bits and pieces of it. Just when the action took place, he didn't sell me with the action.
In the beginning, I thought he was smarter than he actually turned out to be. Because
exactly.
he came up with this plot.
Yes.
He has everything calculated. And then at the end, he just starts making really dumb mistakes. And maybe that's just Kyle showing that he's naive, inexperienced. I do agree that if there had been, like, I think back to one of the good things about Executive Power was like the David or the Jabril character, right?
Exactly.
If he was the one alongside Ben Friedman, right?
Exactly.
If you had some sort of dynamic like that, maybe someone in government, that he was planning this with, and you could see like the sort of, I don't know, the disconnect between the two, and that's what ultimately comes to their downfall. Or if Carol Barnett was controlling him,
Yeah, he needed some sort of connection to do what he did and implement it beyond just some ISIS guys. Like there was this Faisal and someone else, and the ISIS guys were literally just the muscle. I didn't think Alton plus them was a great pairing to conduct this plot. I'll give you the counterpoint. I don't want to spoil anything, but Chris Howdy, author of Deep State, Savage Road, and now Insurrection Day. Chris, if you didn't read it, super awesome novella. Only like 100 pages or something.
I got to read it before we interview him.
Yeah, we're going to have him on in just a few weeks in February. What if Haley Chill was at January 6th? And dude, great little novella side story to his series. But he has, Chris Howdy in Savage Road has a plot involving techie stuff, NSA, and there's a tag team. There's someone on the inside. There's someone with power on the outside. And just the way he crafted that with this inside mole, if you will, this outside influence, hiring that person, their relationship to pull off this plot, is done so much better than Power Station, who was just on his own. Like maybe he tried finding Sonia. So here's a question. Sonia was a Russian mole. She was an illegal. Jed Jones was the podcaster, kind of spewing some anti-government invective over the airwaves. Would you say either of them are villains or secondary villains? Sonia ends up helping, but she was a mole.
I think they're very similar to the Kevin Gray character, victims of They're villains of circumstance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, you know, when thinking back about dynamic duos, obviously we have a lot from Vince's, so sorry if we keep comparing it to Vince's villains, but this is the Mid-Trap series, and he was the creator of it, so deal with it. But the Hakeem and Kareem duo, you know, you had
yes,
someone who's blinded by ambition, someone who didn't really want it but was sort of going along. They were both like had intelligence in their own way. Kareem was super, you know, obviously he was knew about our American ways and could blend in and could get anything. And Hakeem had, you know, the military skills and some sort of dynamic duo like that could have elevated. Not to say like you had to copy that, but if you had more, if Power Station had one more person to play with, or even like a couple people to play with, you know, maybe that would have elevated that villain.
If there was somebody like a Christine Barnett in an election cycle who wanted to benefit from chaos, a Joker figure in the American government, feeding Power Station stuff, who knows why, like what the long game was, but who had some long game, that would have been so much cooler than Power Station being the be-all, end-all. And it would have been more Vince-like, I think, to have someone pulling strings.
Yeah, because she wasn't. Yeah, she was like a villain in Lethal Agent, but she wasn't perpetrating the plot of the actual plot of the pandemic.
Well, no, but she wanted to benefit from it.
Yeah, she wasn't trying to help it.
And that's what almost drove Kevin Gray off the deep end. Was he tried to tell her, as your chief of staff, what you're saying is basically taking advantage of Americans dying. Like, you want to politically spin the hell out of tens of thousands, if not millions of Americans dying. And he couldn't stand for that, where Christine Barnett had no problem with that. That was her ticket to the Oval Office.
So that perfectly sets up then in the next book, she's lost Kevin Gray. Maybe Power Station reaches out to her and has this idea. I don't know how you set it up, you know, but...
Yeah, well, she almost could feel like the pandemic not hitting didn't give her that opportunity.
Exactly.
And she's like, wait, that would have been nice politically. I could have been a shoo-in. I could have been like the strongman after chaos. I could have been the one yelling and screaming in committee hearings about this should have been done, that should have been done. So then she thinks of the grid or whatever, or, you know, just something to bring Power Station into play instead of him coming out of the blue.
Right.
Yeah. That tissue, that connective tissue from Lethal Agent to Total Power. Maybe I'm just sour that we never really saw the election cycle after Lethal Agent set us up so well for it. Maybe that's why I'm down on Total Power, but for another time.
I think it's probably because there's nothing connecting Lethal Agent to Total Power, and then there's really nothing connecting Total Power to Enemy of the Gates. So, which is something that we haven't really seen. That's like the first time we've ever seen that. So,
yeah, I almost feel like Total Power is a standalone book, maybe much more than anything in the series outside of Extreme Measures or Memorial Day.
Yeah.
It's such a standalone.
All right, so the final book we got is Enemy at the Gates. We don't really have a big bad in this one, unless you want to call the Cooks the big bad. But I do think the jury is still out on them in terms of, I can't quite give them a grade yet because their story arc is still evolving. You know, maybe once we finish this 3-book arc, they'll might be firmly implanted in the big bad in the Hank Clark tier. We'll see. I think the main villain of this is probably Mike Nash, who again is kind of a victim of circumstance. What would you say, Mike?
Well,
and then obviously you have Gideon Alma, who plays a role as a villain of the story, but that's he's again a pawn of the Cooks and of these people. So
right here's how I see it: the Cooks could rise to the level of a Hank Clark, or I would even say a Maxime Krupin, Because I think what Kyle did with Crouppen is up there with possibly Hank Clark. Like he holds his own as a villain there. I think the Cooks could get there too, but it's yet to be written. Is it half a book with them? Is it another 3 books with them? Is it 5 books with them? I don't know. The way they want to transform the institution of the presidency and the branches of the American government could just totally really rewrite things. But it hasn't happened. We don't know how it will happen. So, yeah, I'm reserving judgment there. I would say Gideon Alma is the big bad in the sense of he's the one physically causing the chaos and driving the plot. The Cooks doing so kind of psychologically, politically, but I think Gideon Alma is driving the carnage of what Rapp, Scott, and crew have to deal with on the ground in Africa. So I would say Gideon Alma is there, and I would liken him to... Actually, I'm going to go so far. I'm going to liken him to Rafik Aziz, who I think was my favorite of Vince's villains, if I recall. I think I gave him the top spot.
No, you did not. I have it pulled up here.
I gave Hank Clark?
We both had Clark and Gould as our 1 and 2, but we had them flopped. Gould. I had gotcha. Clark as number 2 and Gould as number 1. You had Gould as number 2, Clark as number 1. But you had Aziz as number 3.
I had Aziz as 3. Okay.
I had Aziz as 4.
I remember saying now I had to give it to Hank Clark because the politician scenes and the politician sleaziness was so important to Vince that I had to make that my number.
Yeah, and Louis Gould is just like the most iconic villain in the entire series. Like you had to give it to him. I think Aziz could have risen to that if we had seen him in the next book after Killshot, because we got like the hint of him, and obviously there's this backstory between him and Mitch, the scar that we never found out about. So
yeah,
there's more. That's why I had him so low. I had Rickman as number 3.
All right.
And it kind of was unfair because we didn't yet talk about the Survivor, and he's more of a villain in the Survivor, even though he's dead. There's a question I want to pose to you once we actually get to our rankings, because it's kind of hard to... Some of these characters bleed between Vince and Kyle, and I want to know where you stand on how we can rank that.
It's true. All right, before we get there, though, just to wrap up Gideon Alma, I was saying he's kind of like an Aziz in that he causes the chaos, he causes the carnage, and he just demonstrates this tear in society. How Aziz is driven by hating America so much, he turns to extremism. Gideon Alma, so interested in control, he's willing to basically toss away the lives of his fellow countrymen, use and abuse them, discard them. I feel like the way they both discard life and the way they both drive the plot in terms of its actual physical violence and chaos, I like how Gideon Alma, how he does that. And Kyle's bringing into the series something we've never seen before. Basically, maybe an enemy of the state a little bit, but these African warlords, these child soldiers, the drugs being used.
Right.
I just think that brings up a lot of real world issues that Rapp never dealt with. But if you want to talk about making the world the place it should be and America's ideals and values in the world, you've got to start with the tens of millions of people in bondage to guys like Gideon Alma in these developing nations.
I think what bumps Alma down is the fact that he gets taken out like halfway through the book and becomes Rapp's pawn, and then Rapp uses him.
Yeah, that was weird.
In the first half, he's a very gripping character and is very terrifying. But then once he's sort of, captured, you see it's all like a fraud. And I guess it doesn't I shouldn't hold that against him because that is, he's a showman. He builds it up. But yeah, that's what bumps him down sort of out of my top 5, just to spoil it a little bit. But all right, so that's the villains. Any like sort of overarching themes, any sort of comments about Kyle's villains that you wanted to get out before we give our ratings?
Yeah, I think we said it along the way, so I do want to hear your take on it. The two trends that I notice is that Kyle does some things really well. He can have an idea of this part of reality I want to represent in this character, but it almost makes the books feel too small, as in that's the single narrative they're going for. Oh, this person represents this thing that causes this rift. Rap's got to deal with it. Where I think what Vince did was not say, this one thing causes this rift, but here's the texture, here's the layout of the operating theater, of the environment, which was multifaceted. You know, it was guys on the ground who were going to stab you in the back. It was the enemy. It was the politicians. It was the financiers. You had this network, this collaborative network of bad guys, some who thought they were doing the right thing, and those were the circumstances Rap was put into. So I think Vince's world was much more complex and nuanced, where Kyle's world is kind of leading. This guy represents this thing. Rap's got to fight it. What do you think about that?
I would agree with that. The one thing I do like about Kyle's villains, well, there's a lot I like about Kyle's villains, but one of the things I find is that he liked to try new things. You know, Vince often just had these Middle Eastern villains, which Kyle has as well, and he never really touched. I like how Kyle's touching Africa, and taking us to Africa, taking us to Russia. You know, we're seeing players from all over the world. I guess we had Israel come into play, but again, in the Middle East player. So I like the variety that we see, and now we're getting more. You know, we're seeing these at-home domestic, which again Vince showed with the politicians the whole way through. But yeah, I don't know. I guess the idea of going to Russia, and because that's important. Obviously, Kyle had to move away from the Taliban into ISIS. I think we asked him when we had him on, if you would ever think about like bringing in the Chinese, because I feel like that's an untapped area to bring in. Obviously, a direct adversary of the United States, so, or even like a North Korea, you know.
Right. Rising Tiger. Look at what Brad Thor's going to do. It seems from that title and the cover art, China's gonna come up finally in a thriller. Yeah, I don't know how we ignore the South China Sea, the Spratly Islands, the Uyghur genocide, the Tibetan Buddhists, the Himalaya Mountains and water claims in Kashmir, India, Pakistan, China. Like, I don't know how all of that is untapped for a geopolitical thriller.
If Taiwan, we're not Disney here. We're not worried about the commercial market in China. So let's just do it. Let's get it over with.
I don't know how thrillers are selling to that audience in the first place, you know. So
no, they're not.
Exactly.
So who cares? Let's bring them in.
Do it. Yeah, go after them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think those are my themes. I'll agree with you 100%. Vince did have a formula. Vince relied on the formula.
Yeah.
But damn, man, did he do that formula well.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You're right, though. I hear you on that.
All right, so rapid fire questions for you, Mike. Which villain do you most want back?
Oh. Back as in they're still alive in the universe and could come back, or just even though they're dead, I would like to see them again. You know,
you can take it either way.
I'd like to see Saeed Halabi, except he already rose from the ashes once, in a sense.
Right.
So that's played out. I think I'd like to see Ali Nasser, another intelligence chief somehow brought in, who thinks they could play Irene for a hot second, might seem to have the upper hand on Irene, but you're not going to get a beat on Irene. I think I like that to be recovered. So an Ali Nasser, I think that's what I'm going with. Who would you say?
Yeah, I guess the problem with, and I guess I could go through Vince's villains, but most of these villains die. Where I guess that wasn't always the case because because they would pop back up again, like Gould. But I guess no, Vince did the same. I guess what I would say is Christine Barnett, but she's dead. But like I think I would have liked to seen her again as a villain.
Any interest in Joel Wilson? Because I don't think he gets killed.
No, I don't think he gets killed. Does he get killed?
I don't remember. What does Nasser do with him? No.
He turns.
No, Rap gives him the intelligence.
Exactly. He's
lets
now
him loose in the desert.
Side.
He goes to Irene, wants to play nice. He could still be in the FBI.
He could.
And Irene would have a trump card on him to use him.
We could see him come back.
He could be bred to be like the next director or something. Or does she hire him in the CIA?
She thought about it. I think she wants to use him as an asset, but
he could be used.
I mean, speaking of, we talked about her a little bit, but do you want to see Sonya come back? Not as a villain, but just do you want to see her come back?
Yeah, very much so. We know Scott was dreaming about her last book.
Exactly.
He was dreaming about riding tractors with her. We need more than that. We need more than that.
Yeah, I'd like to see her come back. Yeah,
I think I'd be fine seeing her come back in just a partner role, living in Manassas. But I wouldn't mind, because of her skills, staying undercover for this long in an operational role as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Who do you think was the smartest villain?
Oh, good question. I mean, it jumped out to me. I think I have to go Catherine Cook. Even though she's so recent, her and Anthony Cook, with their plan to take over America and exploit the divisions in society, it's actually pretty bright. Sokolov, though, I would say maybe most intelligent or academic villain. Like, he had the chops.
I was going to go Halabi because we see how he has like these spies everywhere, in various governments, in Saudi Arabia, planted everywhere. And then, we see him get off, almost execute this plot. But yeah, I Catherine Cook is up there with being intelligent. It's so hard to talk about the cooks.
We'll see. I guess we'll have to see.
We just got a taste of them. We just got like our little introduction of them, and my guess is where he's planning on having a big role for them in the next 2 books.
Yeah, I'm with you, Halabi. That's a good choice. Good questions, man. I really like those.
All right, last one here. What's the best kill of a villain?
Oh.
What Rap's best villain kill?
Ooh. All right, let's see. I'm gonna have to think back on some of these. Louis Gould is a great kill, but it's Stan.
Right.
Okay, that's going back way to the Survivor. Krupin, kind of a letdown, how he goes. Carl Ferris is actually not killed with a fork in the thigh.
No, he's not killed.
That'd be interesting to hear if he's still chatting up in Congress, what his plans are for retirement. Ali Nasser, what happens to him? And the Prince. Oh, the Prince is the nightclub shootout. Okay, that was a pretty cool scene.
That was a pretty cool
Rap
scene.
dumps his body. But Rap doesn't kill him. The guy's chasing him.
He's already shot.
He's already shot. He bleeds out. Rap just pushes him out the door, leaves him on the side of the road. Halabi. What happens in Lethal Agent? Does he get the disease?
I can't remember that. I know Christine Barnett, he shows up to her apartment and gives her pills and says you have 2 options to take.
Makes her OD, yep.
Power Station he takes and takes Jet Jones out and shoots Power Station in the woods. That was kind of cool.
That was kind of cool.
Gideon Alma's death is pretty cool, which is similar to Sokolov's death, but I think it's way cooler than Sokolov's death in terms of the people he was punishing had under his power, sort of carry him away and tear him limb by limb apart.
That's revenge. No, not revenge. What's the word Rap says in an earlier book? It's not revenge, it's...
Retribution?
Retribution. Yep, there it is.
How does Ali Nasser die?
Those are great kills.
That's a good...
How does he kill the drug guy in the cartel? The house is burning down.
He shows up at the house.
He shows up at the house. He talks to him. The house is burning.
And then he shoots him.
Does he just shoot him there?
Because he took out all of his guards.
Yes.
And it's like raining. That was a cool kill.
That was a cool scene. I still don't remember Ali Nasser. He gets taken by Halabi. Oh, Rap goes into the cave.
Yeah, Rap kills him at the end of the cave. Yeah, that's
throws the grenade, kills him, but makes the cave implode. Rap barely gets out. Right. Oh, and Joe Mazlitt comes to save Rap. That's
Joe
it.
Mazlitt comes to
That
save
was a
him.
cool cave kill. And then we later learn, 2 books later, Halabi survived it.
Right. Let me just pull up Lethal Agent. How? Oh no, sorry, I was wrong. Rap kidnaps Carlos Esparza, tortures him in the van because he's trying to figure out like where the people are, and that's how he ends up like just bleeding out and dying in the car.
He just bleeds out, being interrogated.
Yep.
Lethal Agent was so long ago when we read it. For being a recent of the books, it just feels like ages ago because since then, we've read more than half the series. Because we did that one early on.
Scott has to go and kill Halabi, remember? So it's not a Rap kill.
Yes, because Mitch is in the hospital.
In the hospital.
In quarantine.
He's in Fort Detrick Hospital. Yep.
Oh, and Scott holds up the picture.
Yes.
Oh, dude, that's epic.
That was cool. It's not technically a Rap kill, but that was pretty cool.
Dude, that counts because actually Scott says this one was for you. He says it's from Mitch. Yo, that's homie got your back.
All right, so if we had to create our Sinister Six, and we can tap into
Vince's
all of the villains.
Oh, dude. Oof.
Okay, before we get to that, let's give our Kyle, because it kind of like
top 5.
They're going to be like sort of related to both of our top 5s, right?
What do you think if we give our top 5s and then we make our Sinister Six a little Rap on Rap, something for the patrons?
Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds good to me.
I like it.
All right, so let's give our top 5s now.
Okay, of Kyle's villains.
Of Kyle's villains. Yep.
All right, let's start low down the list. Let's each give our number 5.
All right, so number 5 for me, I had Power Station there, even though we just shat on him a little bit. So let me just give you the reason why I put him there. His plot and the execution of the plot, and he actually gets it off. He just didn't have the backup plan, the way to get out and survive himself. He's super smart. They hire him to protect the power grid because he's the only one that knows about the power grid, and then he uses that to his advantage and gets it off. So from pure intelligence and execution of plot and the complexity of the plot, that's why I had to bring him into number 5.
Okay. I'm going to go Gideon Alma.
Okay.
I liked what he did. I liked how he was crafted. I liked that it was something different. Pretty good villain. He's not going to crack the top 3. So
okay.
I'll give him the 5 spot, possibly a 4 spot. Who's next?
All right, so for me, it's Ali Nasser.
Okay.
We saw how he wanted the kingship. He wanted to take down King Faisal. He had a great plan, indebted himself to Halabi. He's not higher on the list because I think Halabi is a better villain than him. But for that book, he was, I don't know, really, really engaging, really scary, big player. I don't know. That's why I have him number 4.
Okay. I'm going to go with Carlos Esparza.
Okay.
In the 4 spot, I liked Lethal Agent. And I love the conversation. When Rap comes into his house with his maid, sits down, orders breakfast, and gets the upper hand on him. That conversation of how Carlos is going to use Rap and test Rap and put him through the ringer to make sure he can not trust him, but at least rely on him. So, yeah, I like the drug cartels. Carlos Esparza, number 4.
All right, so I have a question here. I should have asked you before we started. Can we really include the Survivor?
Good question.
Because it would kind of affect how I give you my next three. Because, Joe Rickman, I had him in my top 5 of Vince's villains, and maybe that rules him out.
I'm going to say no. Yeah. I'm saying we got to rule out Rickman. Not only because he's dead at that point, but we already discussed him in Vince's Villains. And the videos he left, while pretty cool, were still the Rickman that Vince made. Even though Kyle wrote the scenes of what he said in the videos, it was Vince's character.
Okay.
So, I don't know. How do you feel about that?
No, I agree with that. All right, so for number 3, I'm going to go Barnett.
Yeah.
We mentioned that I would love to see more of her. I think she was a very powerful politician. I think there was some meat left on the bone there, but what she was sort of angling at, I really liked, and I thought it called back to some other politicians, and maybe the Cooks will get to there, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm putting Barnett there as well. I wanted to move her possibly into the second, but she just didn't have the room to breathe. She was in and out one book. Could have been more. Could have been Hank Clark-esque. Could have become what the Cooks are about to become. If we saw her downfall, and she would have become the Cooks. She could have totally turned into a sinister Hank Clark, gone down that path. But she got cut short. We didn't even get to see her election cycle. So, 3rd spot, yeah.
All right, so number 2, I'm putting Maxim Krupin as the villain. But he's elevated by also the presence of Grisha. Even though we kind of said Grisha's not a villain in the end. But for that one book, in Order to Kill, he is the villain. And he almost kills Scott and has a pretty intense fight with Rapp at the end there. Almost kills him. But I think like that, because Krupin was the mastermind, built him from a child, or not a child, but from when he was an athlete, recruited him, groomed him. So I think like the presence of Grisha and the character of Grisha as that villain elevates Krupin as this mastermind villain. And then we see the downfall of him and his psychosis in Red War. I don't know, but just those 2 books, I really liked Krupin. I think besides my number 1, who we're going to get to next, like this is the best, sort of big bad mastermind that Kyle has come up with.
Yep. I think we're headed the same path for number 1 because we saved this name. Yeah, my number 2, 1, 2, and 3, we're on the same page. Although I was going to be slightly different, not thinking Grisha as a villain. Although you're totally right. Order to Kill. He's a top villain going after Scott. If for half of that book, he was a killer villain. I put Krupin / Sokolov.
Okay.
Almost as co-dictators.
Right.
Because Sokolov was cut short, only in like what, 1/3 or 2/3 of a book, Red War. I didn't want to give him a whole slot. So I would say the Krupin, and forgive me if this is stretching the edges, Krupin, Sokolov, Grisha, the Russian combo, the Russian triple threat. That's my spot number 2.
Yeah, no, I think it's sort of similar to my point with Grisha. It's Krupin thought to bring in Sokolov, so it elevates, Krupin as this mastermind.
Right.
And so I guess
number
1, we have Halabi.
Saeed Halabi. There it is.
Yeah, just his what I said about Ali Nasser and how sort of villainous he was, but you saw this other threat coming up by the end of the book, and by the end, Halabi is really the big bad in that story. And then he has his own, full arc in Lethal Agent, and we love that book. I love that story. And he's so close to getting, he infects Rapp, like Rapp is on, we never thought Rapp was going to die, but just the fact that Rapp was like put to the test. I think so just going back to Power Station, the fact that I don't know if I said this, but the fact that he gets the attack off, which is something we don't often see. When we mainly, I think we saw it once with Vince where the attack actually happened, and then we had to see the fallout. But it's always like Mitch getting to the very end, and he stops it in just the nick of time. But yeah, but again with Halabi, he's almost there. He almost has it, and it's so that he's got to be number one. I would put the Cooks. The Cooks could be here, so I didn't.
Right.
I naturally didn't. So I guess that's the problem. Is some people might, well, why don't you have the Cooks? Like they're going to be these players, but I feel like I can't even. You have Goody Alma, like he would be the only one that you could put in this list from that book, because the Cook storyline is not done yet.
Not there yet.
Come back to us after the next book, that might change.
Right. We could tell they want to take down Rap. They want to slam Irene Kennedy. They just haven't found the way to do it tactfully yet.
Right.
So there's no way they've risen to that level because they just haven't taken out Rap and Kennedy yet, or attempted to. They will. They're going to gut them. They're going to try to gut her CIA, but how and why and the details, we don't know yet. So I got to cheat again. I forgot Ali Nasser for loving him, so I'm going to this Halabi Ali Nasser tag team in Order to Kill as my number one spot. I wanted to include him because I really liked what he did. He probably would have been my 3 or 4 if I could rearrange this. But since I missed him, I'll group him in with Halabi. I think forgetting Order to Kill, Enemy of the State. Forgetting much about it and then rereading it and loving it, Halabi makes that a better book. And Enemy of the State makes Halabi a better villain by setting him up for Lethal Agent.
Exactly.
So he makes the book better. So he makes Ali Nasser's character better. And having him in Enemy of the State, knowing how he's rebuilding the ISIS network or building up the ISIS network, makes Lethal Agent better. The two of them are better. Just the way it all comes together, and it is that continuing storyline, gives him the number one spot. And maybe he's more like a Rafiq Aziz in that he's organizing an extremist network. He has the ideals, a true zealot, like a very deep zealot, fully motivated and driven. And at the same time, he can plan some badass ops and get involved in things on the ground. So Halabi is one of those great characters, kind of like Vince's Rafiq Aziz for me. So there it is.
All right, that's it.
You had some good questions for me. I like that.
Yeah, you should come up with a little social post with our top 5 things, so we can post with this. That'd be fun.
Yeah, good idea. We'll get Mark Harris's top 5. We'll always count on that.
Of course.
We love it. And for our patrons, we'll be giving you our, what'd you call it? Sinister 6?
Sinister
Hateful
6. 8? Yeah.
All right. Slovenly 7? Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't work.
All right. So next week we will be coming to you with don't know yet, but it'll be something like this. We haven't quite decided. We're going to be giving you a series of these one-off pods, themes about the whole book series as a whole. Maybe focusing on Kyle, focusing on Vince. But yeah, just we'll keep you posted on what that'll be in the future.
You know what we might have by then? Yeah, we might have the whole title of Rap 21. We might have to, as we wrap up this pod, we might have to start gearing up towards the road to Rap 21 with some prep episodes, maybe predictions, what we think's coming. And I also thought, what about a little fantasy draft? We draft different players, different names. Say we each get 3 to 5 characters. And then however often they come up in the next book, or things they do in the next book can earn us points. A kill gets you points. A touch, or a hug, or intimacy gets you points. Or drops an F-bomb, or a curse word gets you points. And we'll do a little fantasy game, getting ready for the next book to come.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. And the road to Rap 21, I like that.
Kill with an improvised weapon, gets you points.
There you go. We'll lay it all out. All right, guys, we hope you enjoyed that podcast. next week we're going to be coming to you with some character studies. I think we're going to be diving into some secondary characters, maybe a bunch, maybe some specific ones. We haven't really ironed that out yet, but just know it'll be a character analysis. We need to thank our patrons, including our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us at midtrappod.com or on Twitter and Insta at midtrappod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crux.